The cold, sterile air of the boardroom felt like a ghost of a life she once knew, scented with expensive leather and the faint metallic tang of fear. Celeste Quinn stood before the long mahogany table, a silent figure of judgment against the sprawling, indifferent backdrop of the Chicago skyline. Below them, the city hummed with life, unaware of the tectonic shift happening on the 50th floor. Across from her sat Damon Sterling. His face, usually a confident, handsome mask, was a pallid landscape of raw disbelief. He looked as though he'd been struck by lightning, the shock still sizzling through his veins. His custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, once a second skin, a symbol of his inherited power, now seemed to hang off his frame like a borrowed costume on a man who had forgotten his lines. His knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the table, his only anchor in a world that had just been ripped from its foundations. Next to him, Vivian Vale, the architect of Celeste's initial ruin, was visibly crumbling. Her perfect crimson-painted lips, usually curved in a self-satisfied smirk, trembled uncontrollably. A single, manicured hand clutched Damon's arm, not for support, but with the desperation of a drowning woman pulling her rescuer under with her. They looked at Celeste not as the quiet, accommodating woman they had discarded, but as an apparition, a force of nature they had foolishly mistaken for a gentle breeze and had now returned as a hurricane. 3 years. 3 years of silence, of struggle, of a rebirth forged in fire and solitude. And now, the woman he had fired from this very company, the wife he had abandoned when she was carrying his child, was the new majority shareholder. Her voice, when she finally spoke, did not carry the heat of rage, but the chilling calm of a settled storm, a quiet power that was far more terrifying. "Hello, Damon," she said, the 2 words cutting through the suffocating silence like shards of glass. Let's talk about restructuring. 3 years earlier. The penthouse on North Michigan Avenue was a testament to curated perfection. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off chrome fixtures and illuminating the fine grain of the Italian marble floors. It was a home designed to be photographed for magazines, a space that screamed success with a silent, deafening roar. For Celeste Quinn, it was the beautiful gilded cage she had helped build, bar by gleaming bar. As a rising star at Sterling Holdings, one of Chicago's most formidable real estate development firms, she had poured her architectural soul into its projects. She remembered the pride she felt when her design for the atrium of the new Lakeshore Gateway building, a soaring, light-filled space with a living wall she had fought for, was approved. Damon had taken the credit for it at the press conference, of course, calling it his vision, but in private, he'd told her she was his secret weapon. It was there, amidst the blueprints and scale models, that she had met Damon Sterling, the heir apparent, a man who wore his legacy like a bespoke suit, perfectly tailored, effortlessly impressive, and designed to conceal whatever lay beneath. Their romance was a meticulously orchestrated PR campaign that had somehow blossomed into genuine affection. A whirlwind of gallery openings, charity galas, and weekend trips to the Hamptons culminated in a lavish wedding featured in modern luxury. Moving into the penthouse felt less like starting a home and more like ascending to a throne. Celeste had loved him with an earnest, all-consuming passion that, in retrospect, felt naive. She believed in the future he painted for them, a diptych of power and beauty. He, the visionary CEO who would eclipse his father's formidable shadow. She, the groundbreaking architect at his side, shaping the city's skyline. Now at 28, she was 6 months pregnant with their first child, a daughter. It was the final, perfect brushstroke on their masterpiece of a life. "It's going to be a legacy, Cel," Damon had murmured that very morning, his lips brushing her temple, his scent a familiar, comforting mix of sandalwood and ambition. He was talking about the Olympus Tower, his flagship project, a skyscraper so audacious it aimed to redefine luxury living. But she had heard the words as a promise for everything. Their life, their family, their shared future. The first crack in the facade appeared as a faint, almost imperceptible tremor, the kind you dismiss as the building settling. It was the way Damon had started guarding his phone, angling the screen away with a casualness that was too deliberate. It was the late nights at the office that stretched into the early hours, his excuses becoming more elaborate, his explanations for the faint floral scent clinging to his shirts more creative. Stress, pressure, the Olympus launch. She wanted to be the supportive wife, the understanding partner. She would accept his excuses, her own anxieties feeling like a betrayal of their perfect union. She'd rub the tension from his broad shoulders, her hands tracing the knots of stress, and whisper reassurances into the darkness of their cavernous bedroom. But doubt, once planted in the fertile soil of insecurity, is a hardy and insidious weed. It grew in the dark, quiet moments when she lay awake in their king-sized bed, the vast, empty space beside her feeling colder than ever. She found herself analyzing his words, searching for hidden meanings, her mind becoming a detective in a crime she prayed hadn't been committed. The truth, when it came, wasn't a dramatic, rain-swept confrontation. It was quiet, banal, and utterly soul-crushing. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by the cold, impersonal glow of a tablet screen. She was looking for a document for their mortgage broker in Damon's sleek, minimalist home office, a room she had designed, when she saw it lying on the polished concrete desk, unlocked and open. A thread of messages. The name at the top was Vivienne Vale. Vivienne, the new head of marketing at Sterling Holdings. A woman with raven hair, a razor-sharp smile, and a predatory ambition Celeste had clocked from their very first meeting. Vivienne, who looked at Damon with an unnerving mixture of professional deference and personal hunger. The messages weren't just flirtatious, they were a chronicle of an entire secret life, a detailed ledger of her husband's betrayal. Vivienne. Is she asleep yet? I can't stop thinking about last night. Damon. Soon. Don't worry about her. It's almost over. I've already started the paperwork with legal. Vivienne. I hate that you're there with her. In that house. I hate thinking about you sleeping in that bed. Damon. It's not a house. It's a museum. A stage. You're my home, Viv. Soon, I promise. Everything is lining up. Vivienne. When, Damon? When is soon? The waiting is killing me. What about the complication? Damon. After the Olympus launch. I just need to handle the exit strategy delicately. The complication will be handled. A clean break is best for everyone. Complication. The word struck Celeste with the force of a physical blow. Her hand flew to her mouth, a strangled sob caught in her throat. The baby inside her kicked, a sharp, insistent jab, as if she could sense her mother's world tilting violently off its axis, her vision blurred with hot, angry tears as she scrolled up, her thumb moving with a morbid, unstoppable curiosity. She saw photos, Damon and Vivienne on a yacht, the Chicago sunset bleeding across the sky behind them, his arm wrapped around her waist with a possessive, intimate gesture Celeste hadn't received in months. In the photo, he looked happy. Genuinely, effortlessly happy. Lighter. Free from the weight of the legacy she had tried so desperately to help him carry. She waited for him that night, the tablet resting on the marble coffee table like a verdict. The air in the penthouse, usually so light and open, was thick with unspoken words, heavy with the impending doom of a coming storm. When Damon walked in, whistling softly, he saw her face first, then the tablet. The mask of the charming, unflappable CEO slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing a flicker of raw panic. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a cold, unnerving resolve. "Celeste," he began, his voice low, cautious, the sound of a man preparing his defense. "Don't," she whispered, her voice cracking on the single word. "Don't you dare try to lie to me, Damon. Just tell me why." He let out a long, weary sigh, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. He didn't look at her. He looked past her, out at the glittering tapestry of city lights, as if she were just another part of the scenery. "It just happened, Sel. These things, they're not planned. They're messy." "These things?" Her voice rose, laced with a hysteria she couldn't control. "You mean an affair with your employee? An affair you've been having while I am at home, carrying your child?" She gestured to her swollen belly, the physical evidence of their shared life, their supposed future. "We were building a life, Damon. A family." "Were we?" He finally turned to face her, and the warmth she had once cherished in his eyes was gone. They were the cold, assessing eyes of a stranger, a businessman evaluating a failed investment. Or were we just playing a part, the perfect couple in the perfect home? It was suffocating, Celeste. The pressure, the expectations, my father's legacy, this baby. He gestured vaguely at her stomach, and the casual cruelty of the motion stole her breath. "The baby," she repeated, her hand instinctively, protectively, covering her womb. "It changes everything," he said, the words cold and precise, each one a carefully placed stone building a wall between them. "It makes everything permanent, irreversible. Vivian. She understands me. She understands the pressure I'm under. With her, I can just be myself." "And who are you?" Celeste choked out, the tears now streaming freely down her face, hot trails of humiliation and heartbreak. "Who are you, really?" "I'm a man who needs to make a choice," he said, his posture straightening as he fully inhabited his corporate persona. The decision had been made long before this conversation. This was just the formal termination. "And I choose her. I'm sorry, Celeste. I truly am. But I can't live a lie anymore." The apology was a hollow courtesy, an empty shell of an emotion. He wasn't sorry for breaking her heart. He was sorry it had to be so messy. "So that's it?" she gasped, the room starting to spin. "You throw away our marriage, our family for her?" "I'll have my lawyer contact yours in the morning," he continued, his tone as detached as if he were discussing a quarterly report. "I'll be generous, of course. We'll sell the penthouse. You'll be well taken care of." He thought money could fix this. He thought he could write a check and absolve himself of the devastation he had wrought, balancing the books on their life together. The next morning, the cruelty was compounded, twisted into a new, more public form of humiliation. Her mind a thick fog of grief and sleeplessness, she went to her office at Sterling Holdings, clinging to the last piece of her identity, determined to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Her keycard, the one that granted her access to the building she had helped design, blinked red. Access denied. Confused, she went to the front desk. The receptionist, a kind, older woman named Maria, looked at her with an expression of profound pity. "Oh, Miss Quinn, Celeste. A memo came through this morning from Mr. Sterling's office." She hesitated, unable to meet Celeste's eyes. "Your contract has been terminated, effective immediately." "What?" The word was a faint puff of air, lost in the cavernous, marble-clad lobby. "It cited corporate restructuring and redundancy of your role." Redundancy. She had been made redundant, not just as a wife, but as a professional. He was erasing her, methodically, efficiently, and without a trace of sentiment. He had taken her home, her husband, her job, and her future, all in less than 12 hours. She stood there, in the gleaming lobby of the company she had poured her heart and soul into, a place where her own designs were etched into the very walls. And she had never felt more powerless. She was 6 months pregnant, unemployed, and about to be homeless. Damon hadn't just left her. He had set fire to her entire world and walked away without looking back at the flames. The gleaming penthouse on Michigan Avenue was replaced by a cramped third-floor walk-up in Pilsen, a neighborhood vibrant with colorful murals and the rich aroma of street food, but a universe away from the sterile opulence of her old life. The air in her new apartment was thick with the scent of damp drywall, old paint, and her own despair. The generous settlement Damon had promised was a lie. It became a protracted legal battle, orchestrated by his shark of a lawyer, a man who specialized in dismantling lives with surgical precision. They argued that her emotional state made her an unreliable negotiator, nickel-and-diming every asset, every shared memory, until she was left with a fraction of what she was owed, enough to secure the dingy apartment and little else. The first few weeks were a blur of sheer, primal survival. Morning sickness was a violent, daily reminder of the life growing inside her, the life Damon had dismissed as a complication. Some days, the grief was a physical weight that pinned her to the lumpy second-hand mattress, the city's symphony of sirens and car horns a mocking soundtrack to her misery. She'd lie there for hours, one hand pressed against her belly, feeling the faint, fluttering movements within. A war raged inside her, a fierce, primal love for this unborn child, and a terrifying, suffocating resentment for the circumstances of her existence. Her savings dwindled at an alarming rate. Humiliation became a constant companion, a shadow that followed her everywhere. One Tuesday, she found herself in line at a local food bank, her face hidden by a cheap scarf, her stomach churning with a shame so profound it felt like nausea. As she accepted a box of generic pasta, canned vegetables, and powdered milk, the woman ahead of her, a tired-looking mother with 2 small toddlers clinging to her legs, gave her a small, knowing smile. There was no judgment in her eyes, only a shared, weary understanding of hardship. That small, unexpected act of kindness broke something open in Celeste. She fled, hurrying back to her apartment as sobs racked her body, the weight of the charity box in her arms feeling as heavy as her failure. She was utterly, terrifyingly alone. Her parents had passed away in a car accident when she was in college, and Damon, she now realized, had systematically isolated her from her old friends. He had subtly discouraged her relationships, weaving a web of social engagements that revolved entirely around his world, his colleagues, his clients. The only person she could think of was Harper Reyes, her fiery, no-nonsense college roommate who now worked as a freelance journalist. They had drifted apart, a casualty of Celeste's absorption into Damon's gilded world, swallowing her pride, a pride that had already been pulverized into dust. She dialed the number she still knew by heart. "Celeste? Holy shit, is that you?" Harper's voice was a shock of warmth in her cold, silent world. The dam broke. Celeste poured out the whole sordid story, the words tumbling out in a torrent of pain, shame, and incoherent rage. She told her about Damon, Vivian, the baby, the firing, the food bank. She expected pity, or perhaps a gentle, "I told you so," because Harper had never been Damon's biggest fan, finding him as charming and as deep as a puddle of spilled champagne. Instead, there was a beat of charged silence on the other end of the line. "Okay," Harper said finally, her voice firm, devoid of pity. "So you can either lie there and let that narcissistic trust fund prick win, or you can get up and build a goddamn empire out of the ashes. He didn't just fire an architect, Sel. He fired a creator. He fired a woman who sees the world in lines and light and possibility. So for God's sake, create." The words were a splash of icy water to the face. "Create what, Harper?" Celeste cried, her voice thick with tears. "I have nothing. I am nothing." "Bullshit," Harper snapped back. "You have a mind that can design skyscrapers from the ground up. You have a master's degree in sustainable design that you've never really used because you were too busy propping up his glass and steel vanity projects. Most importantly, you have a baby on the way who is going to need a mother, not a martyr. Stop thinking about what he took from you and start thinking about what you still have." That night, for the first time in months, Celeste didn't cry herself to sleep. She lay awake, Harper's words echoing in the darkness of her small bedroom. He fired a creator. So create. She thought about the soulless, extravagant designs of Sterling Holdings, buildings that were monuments to wealth, but devoid of humanity. She thought about her real passion, the one she had suppressed to fit into Damon's world. Sustainable, human-centric design. Creating spaces that were not just beautiful, but functional, affordable, and kind to the environment. A flicker of an idea ignited in the darkness. She got up, went to the small, wobbly kitchen table, and with a pencil and a crumpled piece of paper from the charity box, she began to sketch. She didn't sketch skyscrapers or luxury penthouses. She sketched modular, adaptable furniture for small living spaces. She designed vertical gardens for apartment balconies, clever storage solutions that folded away into the walls. She conceptualized affordable, eco-friendly home kits for families who, like her, were starting over with nothing. The designs poured out of her, fueled by 3 months of repressed grief and a burgeoning anger that was finally, blessedly, transmuting into purpose. Her daughter, Aurora, Rory, was born on a cold December morning in a public hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic a world away from the private suite she and Damon had once booked. Holding the tiny, 7-pound miracle in her arms, her perfect face a miniature echo of her own, Celeste felt a profound and permanent shift in her soul. The last vestiges of her victimhood fell away, burned off by the fierce, incandescent heat of a mother's love. This child was not a complication. She was a clarification. Rory was her why. With a small loan from Harper, who insisted it was an investment, not charity, Celeste bought a used laptop and a second-hand 3D printer. Her tiny apartment became her office, her workshop, and her nursery. She named her fledgling company Phoenix Designs, a name that was both a cliché and a profound personal truth. During the day, she cared for Rory, her world shrinking to the sweet scent of baby powder, the rhythm of feedings and naps, and the overwhelming love that filled every corner of her small apartment. At night, while Rory slept in a bassinet by her desk, lulled by the soft hum of the printer, Celeste worked. She built a website, taught herself digital marketing through free online tutorials, and started posting her designs on social media. The beginning was painfully slow. A few sales on Etsy, a custom bookshelf for a neighbor down the hall. But her designs were innovative, beautiful, and born of real-world necessity. Her story, which she shared with a raw and unapologetic honesty on a blog Harper helped her set up, began to resonate. People were drawn to the idea of a woman rebuilding her life, one beautifully designed, sustainable product at a time. Her first big break came from an influential design blogger who discovered her modular Grow With Me children's furniture line, a crib that converted into a toddler bed, then a desk, inspired by her own needs for Rory. The feature went viral overnight. Orders started pouring in, overwhelming her tiny operation. Harper came over after work to help her pack boxes. The kind woman from the food bank, whose name she learned was Rosa, became her first employee, helping with assembly in the evenings for cash. Phoenix Designs grew, slowly at first, then with gathering momentum. Celeste moved from the cramped apartment to a small workshop in a converted warehouse, then a larger one. She hired more people, often single mothers and women re-entering the workforce, creating the supportive, flexible work environment that was the absolute antithesis of the cutthroat, patriarchal culture at Sterling Holdings. She was a demanding boss. Her standards for quality and design were exacting, but she was fair, empathetic, and she paid a living wage. She was building more than a company. She was building a community. She never looked up Damon. She never checked his social media or allowed herself to wonder about his life with Vivian. She poured all her energy forward, refusing to look back at the fire, focusing only on the structure she was building from its ashes. But sometimes, late at night, after Rory was asleep and the workshop was quiet, she would stand by the window, and the ghost of her past life would visit. She would remember the betrayal, the powerlessness, the coldness in his eyes, and she would feel not just sadness, but a mrezu hardening in her gut. It wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about reclaiming her own story. It was about ensuring that no one, no man, no company, no circumstance, could ever hold that kind of power over her again. 3 years passed in a whirlwind of early mornings, late nights, strategic decisions, and the joyful, chaotic bliss of raising a daughter. The Chicago skyline, once a painful symbol of her loss, was now the backdrop to her triumph. From her office on the 40th floor of a sleek, modern tower in the West Loop, a building celebrated for its LEED Platinum certification, Celeste Quinn could see the imposing, arrogant silhouette of the Sterling Holdings headquarters several blocks away. It no longer stirred a painful lurch in her gut. Instead, it elicited a quiet, analytical curiosity, the way a scientist might observe a dying star. Phoenix Designs was no longer a kitchen table startup. It was a multi-million-dollar force in the sustainable architecture and design industry. Its innovative approach to affordable, eco-conscious living solutions had captured the zeitgeist. They had won prestigious design awards, been featured in Forbes and Architectural Digest, and Celeste, once the disgraced, abandoned wife, was now a celebrated CEO, a reluctant poster child for female empowerment and entrepreneurial resilience. She was a different woman. The softness in her features had been honed into a sharp, intelligent elegance. Her wardrobe of bespoke suits and architectural dresses, all from ethical designers, was her armor. Her voice, once prone to trembling, was now measured and confident, capable of commanding a boardroom of investors or soothing her daughter's scraped knee with equal authority. Rory, a bright, curious 3-year-old with Damon's dark, wavy hair and her mother's determined green eyes, was the sun around which Celeste's universe orbited. Their home, a beautifully restored brownstone in Lincoln Park that Celeste had redesigned herself, was filled with light, laughter, and the innovative, life-affirming products her company created. It was a sanctuary built not on wealth, but on purpose. The only man in her life, besides the contractors and engineers she managed with formidable efficiency, was Adrian Kai. A sharp, insightful venture capitalist who had been one of Phoenix's early and most ardent investors, Adrian saw more than just a profitable business. He saw the fire and brilliance in Celeste. Their relationship was one of deep mutual respect and a simmering, unspoken attraction. He understood her boundaries, the guarded fortress she had built around her heart, and he never pushed. He was her ally, her confidant, and perhaps one day, something more. But for now, Celeste's focus remained singular: her daughter and her company. The news about Sterling Holdings came to her through Adrian. It wasn't a sudden dramatic collapse, but a slow, creeping decay she had half expected. "Damon's been bleeding the company dry for years," Adrian explained over coffee in her office, sliding a tablet across the polished bamboo desk. It was filled with financial reports, market analysis, and damning internal reviews. "He's all flash, no substance. He sank a fortune into that Olympus Tower vanity project, which is now half empty and hemorrhaging money. He's taken on massive debt. His leadership style is autocratic, and he's completely missed the shift in the market towards sustainable and mixed-use developments. He's still building glass palaces for the 1%, while the rest of the world is looking for community and affordability." Celeste scrolled through the data, her mind coolly dissecting the numbers. She recognized the patterns of arrogance and short-sightedness. Damon had always been seduced by prestige over pragmatism, by the grand gesture over the sound investment. "Their stock is at an all-time low," Adrian continued, his eyes watching her carefully, gauging her reaction. "The board is panicking. They're vulnerable, incredibly vulnerable." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle in the air between them. "Vulnerable enough for a hostile takeover." Celeste looked up from the tablet, her heart giving a sudden, powerful thud against her ribs. The idea was audacious, terrifying, and deeply, intoxicatingly compelling. Buy the company that had fired her? The company that was her ex-husband's entire identity, his birthright? "It's not just about him, is it?" she said, the question directed more at herself than at Adrian. He nodded, understanding her immediately. "No, I did some digging. He's planning a massive layoff to try and stop the bleeding. Over 500 employees. Many of them, like Maria at your old front desk, have been there for decades. Their pensions, their futures. It's all on the chopping block so he and his little marketing guru can keep living their lavish lifestyle." Vivian. The name still left a bitter taste in her mouth. Celeste had heard through the industry grapevine that she was now the executive vice president of marketing at Sterling, a position for which she had little qualification beyond her relationship with the CEO. Celeste thought of Maria, the kind receptionist. She thought of the junior architects who had looked up to her, the dedicated engineers who had respected her. These were the people who would pay the price for Damon's hubris and Vivian's ambition. The motive, sharp and clear, crystallized in her mind. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge was a hot, messy emotion, and Celeste was all cool precision now. This was about justice. It was about rectifying a wrong on a scale she had never imagined possible. It was about saving the livelihoods of hundreds of people and transforming a toxic, dying monolith into something that could be innovative and humane. It was about taking the power back, not to crush him, but to build something better from the wreckage he had created. It was the ultimate Phoenix project. "What would it take?" she asked, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside her. A slow, knowing smile spread across Adrian's face. He knew that look in her eyes. It was the same look she'd had when she first pitched Phoenix Designs to him years ago, armed with nothing but a battered laptop and a ferocious, unshakable will to succeed. "It would take everything you've got," he said, his tone serious. "Financially, it would be a stretch, even for Phoenix. We'd need to bring in other investors, form a consortium. I can make the calls. The real question is, are you ready for the fight? He won't go down easy. It will get personal. It will get ugly." Celeste thought of the food bank line. She thought of the nights spent crying on a lumpy mattress, her hand on her pregnant belly. Feeling utterly alone, she thought of holding her newborn daughter, terrified, and yet filled with a strength she never knew she possessed. Then she thought of Rory, now sleeping peacefully in her bed, safe and loved. She had already survived the ugliest fight of her life. This was just business. "He has no idea what's coming," Celeste said, a glacial calm settling over her. "Let's make the calls, Adrian. Let's buy his company." The plan was executed with the precision of a military campaign. Adrian and Celeste formed a private investment group, Phoenix Capital, quietly buying up huge blocks of Sterling Holdings stock through various shell corporations to avoid tipping their hand. They leveraged Phoenix's sterling reputation and Celeste's compelling story to bring other powerful, forward-thinking investors on board, all of whom were hungry for a change in leadership at the floundering real estate giant. Damon remained blissfully, arrogantly oblivious. He was too busy planning a lavish gala to celebrate the resilience of Sterling Holdings, a desperate PR move orchestrated by Vivian to quell the rampant rumors of their financial trouble. While they were picking out floral arrangements and approving catering menus, Celeste and her team were executing a multi-million-dollar corporate raid. Within 2 weeks, they had secured a 51% controlling interest. The final call was made to the chairman of the board, an old family friend of the Sterlings, who, faced with the undeniable numbers and the promise of a revitalized company under Celeste's visionary leadership, reluctantly agreed to call an emergency board meeting. The day of the meeting, Celeste dressed with meticulous care. She chose a charcoal gray suit with sharp, clean lines that spoke of power and precision. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. Her only jewelry was a simple pair of diamond studs, a gift to herself on the first anniversary of Phoenix Designs. She looked in the mirror and saw not the woman who had been broken, but the woman who had put herself back together, stronger and more formidable than before. As she rode the private elevator up to the top floor of the Sterling Holdings building, she felt a strange sense of calm. This wasn't a homecoming. It was an exorcism. She was finally ready to face the ghosts of her past, not as a victim, but as their master. The boardroom at Sterling Holdings was exactly as Celeste remembered it, a cavern of dark, polished wood, gleaming chrome, and suffocating ego. The long mahogany table reflected the grim, anxious faces of the board members, a collection of old-guard businessmen who looked as though they were attending a funeral for their own fortunes. At the head of the table, in a throne-like leather chair, sat Damon. When Celeste walked in, flanked by Adrian Kai and her legal team, a collective gasp seemed to suck the very air out of the room. Damon's face cycled through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, a dark, simmering rage. He looked at her as if she were a ghost who had wandered into the wrong haunting ground. Vivian, seated slightly behind him in a carefully staged display of subordinate devotion, turned a sickly shade of white, her perfectly glossed lips parting in a silent "oh" of shock. "Celeste?" Damon finally managed, his voice a hoarse, strangled whisper. "What the hell are you doing here?" Celeste didn't answer him. She walked with a calm, deliberate pace to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table, a seat reserved for the highest power in the room, and placed her leather portfolio down with a soft, definitive thud. The sound echoed in the tense silence. "Good morning, members of the board," she said, her voice clear and resonant, filling the room with an authority it hadn't heard in years. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Celeste Quinn. As of 8:15 this morning, my investment group, Phoenix Capital, acquired a 51% controlling interest in Sterling Holdings, which means, as of now, I am in charge." The statement landed like a grenade. Chaos erupted. Damon shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "This is insane! It's impossible!" he sputtered, his face turning a blotchy, unattractive red. "You can't do this! This is my family's company!" "It was your family's company, Damon," Celeste corrected him, her gaze as cold and sharp as ice. "Now it's a publicly traded corporation, and you, unfortunately, have driven its value into the ground with your mismanagement. Please, sit down. We have a lot to discuss." Her unnerving calm seemed to unhinge him more than any screaming match could have. He remained standing, trembling with an impotent fury that made him look small and pathetic. Celeste turned her attention to the stunned board. "I've reviewed the financials for the last 3 fiscal years. I've seen the spiraling debt, the over-leveraged assets, and the catastrophic failure of the Olympus Tower project. A project, I might add, that diverted nearly 40% of the company's capital based on ego rather than sound market research." She paused, letting the indictment hang in the air. "I've also seen the plan for the impending restructuring, firing 512 employees to cover your losses, Damon. Was that your brilliant idea? Or did it come from your executive vice president of marketing?" She flicked a cool, dismissive glance at Vivian, who flinched as if she'd been physically struck. "This is a private board matter," Damon snarled, grasping for some semblance of control. "Not anymore," Adrian Kai interjected smoothly, his voice a calm counterpoint to Damon's rage. "Ms. Quinn now holds the authority to review and reverse any and all executive decisions." Damon's desperation began to curdle into something uglier, more manipulative. He changed tactics, his voice dropping into a tone of faux intimacy that made Celeste's skin crawl. "Celeste, listen to me. We have a history. We have a child together," he said, the words tasting like poison in the air. "You can't do this to me. To us." The room fell silent. He had dared to bring Rory into this. He had invoked the name of the child he had never met, never supported, never even asked about, as a shield. A wave of pure, white-hot fury washed over Celeste, a rage so intense it was almost clarifying. She forced it down, compressing it into a diamond-hard point of resolve. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto his, and all the pain, all the lonely nights, all the fear of the past 3 years were distilled into her next words. "Do not," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level that was more terrifying than any shout, "ever speak my daughter's name in this room. You forfeited the right to call yourself her father the day you called her a complication and walked out on us. You have no idea what us is. Us was me, alone in a tiny apartment, wondering how I was going to afford diapers. Us was me building a company from nothing while raising our daughter by myself. You are not a part of that us. You are a ghost, a bad memory." Damon paled, speechless. He had expected tears, emotional appeals, a messy scene. He was not prepared for this surgeon-like precision, this cold, factual evisceration of his pathetic attempt at manipulation. Vivienne, seeing her man falter, decided to step in, her voice high and strained. "You're just doing this for revenge," she accused, trying to paint Celeste as a scorned woman. "You're bitter, and you want to destroy him because he chose me." Celeste turned her gaze to Vivienne, studying her not as a rival, but as a flawed business problem. "You think this is about him?" she asked with a small, mirthless smile. "Ms. Vale, you have been the Executive VP of Marketing for 2 years. In that time, the company's brand recognition has plummeted, and your only major campaign was for the Olympus Tower, a project that is now a financial black hole. Your primary qualification for this role seems to be your relationship with the CEO. That isn't bitterness. That is a fact from your own disastrous performance review. You are a liability to this company, just as he is." The direct, factual nature of the attack left Vivian sputtering. Under the weight of Celeste's steely gaze, the facade of their power coupledom began to crack. Damon, instead of defending her, shot Vivian a venomous look, as if it were her fault they were in this mess. In that single, fleeting glance, Celeste saw their entire relationship for what it was: a shallow alliance of convenience, now crumbling under pressure. Celeste stood up, moving to the head of the table, physically claiming the seat of power. She was in complete command. "Here is what is going to happen," she announced, her voice ringing with clarity and purpose. "The planned layoffs are canceled, effective immediately. Every employee contract will be reviewed, and all pensions will be protected. We will be pivoting away from luxury monoliths and investing heavily in sustainable, mixed-use community projects, the very market that Phoenix Designs has come to dominate. We are going to rebuild this company from the ground up, based on innovation, integrity, and fiscal responsibility." She looked directly at Damon, her expression unreadable, a perfect mask of corporate control. "As for the current leadership, a company cannot heal with poison still in its veins. Damon Sterling, your position as CEO is terminated. Vivian Vale, your position as Executive Vice President is also terminated. Your access has been revoked. Security will escort you from the building. You will have 1 hour to clear out your personal effects under supervision." It was the same cold, corporate language he had used to fire her 3 years ago. The symmetry was brutal and beautiful. "You bitch," Damon finally breathed, the last of his composure gone, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "After everything, you're going to just throw me out?" Celeste looked at him, and for the first time she felt not anger, not sadness, but a profound and weary pity. He was just a small, hollow man, inflated by a legacy he could never live up to. "You threw me out when I was 6 months pregnant and had nothing, Damon," she said, her voice devoid of malice, stating it as a simple point of historical record. "The difference is I'm not leaving you with nothing. I'm leaving you with the consequences of your own choices. That's something you've never had to face before. It's time you learned." She turned her back on him, a final, definitive act of dismissal, and addressed the stunned board. "The transition will begin immediately. I'll need a new leadership team, and I will be promoting from within, based on merit, not nepotism. We have a lot of work to do." As 2 uniformed security guards entered the room and walked purposefully towards a defeated Damon and a weeping Vivian, Celeste did not watch. She was already looking forward, at the skyline beyond the window, at the future she was about to build on the foundations of her past. The reckoning was over. The reconstruction was about to begin. In the weeks that followed, Celeste moved through the offices of Sterling Holdings, soon to be rebranded as Phoenix Sterling Synergy, like a restorative force of nature. The oppressive, fear-based culture that Damon had cultivated began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious but growing sense of optimism. She didn't occupy Damon's ostentatious corner office, with its panoramic views and intimidating aura. Instead, she chose a smaller, glass-walled office in the center of the main floor, making herself visible and accessible. The message was clear. The era of the untouchable monarch was over. She held town halls, listening to the concerns of employees who had been ignored for years. She walked the floors, learning the names of the architects, engineers, and administrative staff, her genuine interest a stark contrast to Damon's aloofness. She promoted Maria, the receptionist who had shown her kindness on her worst day, to her executive assistant, a move that sent a powerful message throughout the company. Loyalty, kindness, and competence would be rewarded. The junior architects she had once mentored were now given lead roles on exciting new projects that focused on community and sustainability. The dead weight, the cronies Damon had hired, was cut, but the heart of the company, its talented and dedicated workforce, was saved and nurtured. One afternoon, Adrian Kai found her staring out her office window, a pensive look on her face. "A penny for your thoughts?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe, his presence a comforting constant. "I was just thinking," she said, a small wry smile playing on her lips, "that I spent so long trying to forget this place, to erase it from my memory. And now I'm spending all my time trying to fix it." "It's not the same place, Celeste," he said softly. "You changed it. You took away its power to hurt you and gave it a new purpose. That's not fixing something broken. That's creating something new." He was right. The building was no longer a monument to her pain. It was just a building. The power it held was the power she gave it. And she was choosing to give it the power to heal, to build, to create good in the world. The weight she had carried for 3 years, the ghost of Damon's betrayal, had finally, completely lifted. She felt light. Her true empire, her real sanctuary, remained her home. That evening, she was on the floor of Rory's playroom, building a towering castle out of colorful magnetic blocks, one of Phoenix Design's best-selling toys. Rory, with her bright, infectious laugh, placed a final, crooked block on the very top. "It's the biggest castle ever, Mommy," she declared with the absolute certainty of a 3-year-old. "Yes, it is, my love," Celeste said, pulling her daughter into a fierce hug, breathing in the sweet, irreplaceable scent of her hair. This was her empire. Not the steel and glass tower downtown, but this small, perfect kingdom of love and laughter. Damon had tried to contact her once, through a lawyer, begging for a meeting. She had refused without a moment's hesitation. There was nothing left to say. His story in her life was over. Hers was still being written. Her redemption wasn't found in that boardroom, in the cold, satisfying act of firing the man who had wronged her. That had been a necessary closing of a chapter, a balancing of the scales. Her true redemption was here, in the quiet, ordinary moments of her life. It was in the knowledge that she had built a life of purpose and integrity on her own terms. It was in seeing her daughter grow up in a world where her mother was not a victim, but the architect of her own destiny. It was in the quiet strength she now wore, not as armor, but as her own skin. The sky above her was open and endless, and for the first time in a long, long time, she was ready to fly. Celeste Quinn's story is a powerful testament to the fact that our deepest wounds can become the source of our greatest strength. She transformed the ultimate betrayal into a catalyst for breathtaking success, not for simple revenge, but for a profound reclamation of her life and power. She didn't just buy a company, she rebuilt her world, her purpose, and her dignity on a foundation of resilience, intelligence, and integrity. Her journey reminds us that you can either be crushed by your past or you can choose to build your future upon it. The choice, in the end, is always yours. What did you think of Celeste's incredible transformation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If her story of strength and perseverance inspired you, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe for more unforgettable stories of triumph over adversity. Thank you for watching.